Happy politics. It's another edition of BC Poly Hot Stove. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Orca. I'm joining you live from the legislature in Victoria, BC. And in a socially distant manner, I'm joined by...
It's Jordan Bateman. I'm Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. Maclean, I'm just going along my day today, tuning into Smitty, as is my custom on the big dog, CKNW. And lo and behold, whose dulcet tones do I hear but one, Maclean K. And it's all about some games you're playing. Sir, what is happening?
The strangest thing, if you're watching this, you probably already know, but I received a package in the mail in my condo with no return address. And enclosed was a board game called ICBC Monopoly.
Sorry.
I mean, where do you even begin? I mean, it is let me say this to start. It is not just like the board. It is a fully enclosed box with all the pieces and everything you'd ever need to play. And it's very detailed and very intricate. You and I were talking a bit about it before. I've shared some of the cards.
What are the pieces? Like, what are the pieces that are?
Yeah, well, there's a dumpster fire. There is the broker is a boat. There are 3 different ICBC employees because it has so many. It's very well thought out. All the properties are cities in BC, but instead of, I'm going to get this wrong, instead of community chest and chance, I think that's right, it's mystery letter and renewal notice. And that's where all the details of the game are. Every time you draw one of those, it'll hit you with some random ICBC fact and, please pay $40, et cetera, and so forth. It's a very impressive box.
Okay, so little pieces, as you mentioned, and you were telling me offline, it's cities? Like you buy cities,
Yeah.
BC cities? Okay.
Yeah, all the properties are cities. Like the boardwalk is Vancouver.
Yeah.
But there's everything from Prince Rupert to Whistler to, Victoria.
Yeah. See, I got a tweet about this yesterday from someone asking / accusing if I was behind it. I am not, and here's how you know. Langley is only in the yellows, kind of that Atlantic City. Langley should be Park Place. Boardwalk, Langley. So that's how you know it's not me.
Sure. No, it's not. Yes, it's...
behind Surrey, come on.
What's that, sorry?
Behind Surrey, come on. Maclean, I should mention, Maclean sent me a picture of the board, and so I was studying it scrupulously here before I went on to see it.
Yeah, well, I tweeted pictures of the board, and yeah, I thought you would enjoy it, so I sent you a couple pictures. Here's the thing. I love
the ride sharing reference, by the way, on the utility square. That was well done.
It's a very well done thing. I talked about this on CKNW, and on CTV interviewed me as well. When I tweeted about it, I did not know where it came from. As I said, no return address. I have since found out who. They have asked me not to share, and I'm going to respect that. But I can confirm it's not Jordan.
It's not me. It's not me. Although I do love the idea that someone out there thinks I'd be sitting at home during this pandemic, quietly putting together a monopoly board of ICBC facts. Listen, it is an ongoing. Let's talk about ICBC a little bit more globally here. This is a significant problem file for every government who's ever been in power in BC. The Socreds weren't great at managing it. The Clark and Harcourt era NDP in the 90s weren't great at managing it. Certainly we've heard enough about the past 16 years of BC Liberals and how they handled it. And now we're back to the NDP. And again, not great what's going on there. Rates spiking. They're haven't given a rebate to drivers during COVID, even though every other insurance company on the planet has been doing that because claims have plunged. Not ICBC. They're holding on to that money. This is an example of how we've kind of moved to the farcical nature of ICBC. Like we've moved past the kind of eye raise concern to this thing is just, it's basically a farce. I will submit to you again, Maclean. Take it from someone who works for a construction association that has an insurance company that handles benefits for thousands and thousands of construction workers in this province. Insurance is a very difficult, very nuanced, very specialized business that you need incredible skill at, and you need experience. And ministers don't have that. We don't elect, I can't think of the last time we elected a minister who was a high-ranking insurance, or an MLA who was a high-ranking insurance official. So you get these people put in charge of a file that they don't really understand or that they're trying to come up to speed on, and not surprisingly, things go awry. And ICBC during its healthy times have been when they've had a strong CEO with a very strong vision and a mandate from the minister to go and do, to kind of balance out public interest and profitability. That's been taken away in recent years. The problem, again, I've said it many times, the problem with ICBC is the fact that politicians run it.
Yeah. We've talked about ICBC before. I got asked on the radio today, do I think ICBC will be an election issue next year? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in the last election. It's been an issue for a long time now. And that's without coming down on either side of it. ICBC is going to be a major issue in the next election, and it would have been without this game.
Yes.
This game is not going to make it an issue.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, the Monopoly theme has been going around for a while. Chris Sims from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, my alma mater, had a big balloon of the Monopoly man, kind of making fun of ICBC. You haven't told me, but I suspect she's not behind this one, because generally the CTF doesn't go back to the same theme twice.
Yeah.
So I suspect that it's not her. However, I have no idea, and I'm not going to ask, unless you want to tell me.
Offline.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Great. That makes for great podcasting.
As I desperately change subjects, speaking of issues that won't go away, there was quite a piece by Vaughn Palmer in the Vancouver Sun, I want to say earlier this week. The Massey Tunnel. It's still there.
Yeah, Vaughn is back, baby.
The gridlock. The deadlock over the gridlock is still there.
Yeah. Look, Vaughn Palmer is back. Thought this was one of his sharpest columns in some time. Not sharp as far as the point, because he's always very articulate about his points, but sharp in taking the knife out, sharpening it, and sticking it into the government of the day, which has been Vaughn Palmer's bread and butter for about 30 years that he's been writing for the Vancouver Sun, or however long. Sorry, Vaughn, if it's less, I'm so sorry, but it's been a long time. The Massey Tunnel is such a missed opportunity, and I think as time goes on, we will regret more and more John Horgan's very short-sighted, politically reflexive, frankly selfish decision to cancel the project that Christy Clark and the BC Liberals had approved. The untold story of the Massey Bridge that wasn't to be, the 10-lane bridge that had been proposed by the BC Liberals, studied to death, got the environmental approvals through, and then had gone out to tender. The tender had come back $900 million under budget. They were expecting to spend $3.5 billion on that project. They actually got a bid for $2.6 billion. And I'm going to tell you, even if that company missed their bid by 30%, like 20%, whatever it is, they still would have been under budget. They still would have made their budget. But, this company had done all the work, felt like the risk was fine to take. They sharpened their pencil and got a great bid. And it wasn't a bid that was totally out of line with other bids that came in. It wasn't like these guys had scraped the bottom, in order just to get it and get their foot in the door. No, this was a competitive bid with other bids, but $900 million less than had been budgeted. Yet still, and then $100 million of work went on before the election. Unlike the Site C Dam, Christie had waited too long to get this project going. She couldn't get it past the point of no return like she did with the Site C Dam. So this was an easy cancel for the NDP and an easy signal for John Horgan to show someone in his base, I'm not sure who that is, I guess maybe the building trades unions and or some of the environmental folks, that, I'm listening, I'm going to cancel this monument to Christy Clark. It was purely selfish. It was purely about the fact that the former premier had approved it. There's nothing more than that to it. The problem is they still need to replace the tunnel. 60 plus years old. It's falling apart. We can slap on all the white paint and lighting we want. It doesn't change the fact that the tunnel's coming apart, and God forbid anyone is trapped in that tunnel during an earthquake, because you're dead. You are literally dead if you're in that friggin' tunnel during an earthquake. The thing will buckle, it'll collapse, it'll pop up, the water will flow in, you'll be tumbled downstream. It is a horrible, messy death, as outlined in a City of Delta report that still gives me nightmares every time I approach the tunnel. Ugh. So, plus it's a major commercial thing, right? You've got the Delta port on one side, you got Richmond and Vancouver on the other, you got London Drugs trying to move out. All this happens. And so the NDP say, we have to replace the tunnel. Their plan is to replace the tunnel with virtually the same lane configuration it has today, and to pay more to do it, and to restart all the environmental approvals, and to do, like all these different things. They have set back the cost of replacing this tunnel by 10 years, and it's going to cost them, I bet you by the time they get done, $4 to $4.5 billion to do work that we could have had for $2.5 billion and a better bridge. And that would already be almost 2/3 done. Like, it's just mind-boggling, this decision. I hope Delta residents punish them the next time the election rolls around.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I was going to say, is that you can't wish the need for some replacement project away. You touched on London Drugs, talking about possibly moving out of Richmond. A lot of the time you see the reaction on places like Twitter is like, well, the solution is to take cars off the road. I mean, sure, in 40 years, but if you're a commuter right now, spending every day trying to get just to and from your work, that's not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the really odd thing about this is it's in politically sensitive ridings.
Yes.
I mean, had the NDP, we're going to ignore a bunch of details and stuff, but let's say the NDP had canceled Site C. Mm-hmm. They're going to lose those ridings up there anyway. Yeah. Delta North is a dangerously tight riding. Some of the ridings in Surrey, that's where the election will probably be fought and lost and won in the next election, is in Surrey. Those are the people, to some extent, who have to deal with that gridlock each and every day. It's kind of politically, it's a tricky one for them.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It was kowtowing to, I guess, Richmond, some Vancouver ridings. I'm not really sure who they thought they were actually supporting by doing this, but it's just one of those selfish decisions made purely out of
spite.
That's spiteful politics. There's no other reason. There's no other reason there's no other way to explain it. It's crazy, and it's going to cost so much more. It sets back transportation 10 years. And look, we talk about wanting to take cars off the road. The airport is on that island. When you were coming from the south of the Fraser, you take the 99 tunnel to get to the airport, or you take the 91, but you have to still cross onto that island. Sorry, folks I know the Canada Line has changed a little bit for people going in and out of downtown. Suburban folks who are headed to the airport generally are bringing bags, they're headed on vacation, it's not necessarily as much of a business trip. You have a vehicle, that's why the park and flies are always full, right? This is the way people travel through there. It just boggles my mind that, and then of course now we're in a pandemic and transit ridership is soaring. TransLink is having to resort to cutesy photo ops like masks on the front of buses. Hint, buses can't get COVID. I don't know why it's a dumb photo op, but they're hoping to give away, because they spent money on a fake mask for a bus in order to give away free masks for real people. It's typical stupid TransLink thinking. But anyways, sorry, don't get me started on TransLink again. The bridge should be half built. We should be on our way. Instead, we flushed $100 million down the toilet, plus a $2.5 billion bid. And now we're going to end up spending billions more. And just remember, guys, every $90 million or so that you're spending on something else, like wasting money on redoing environmental study reports to build a tunnel that you already had a bridge approved for, that's $90 million less dollars for a secondary school. If it's $40 million, that's $40 million less for an elementary school in Surrey. Mm-hmm. That's $1 billion. If you end up spending $3.8 billion on a new tunnel instead of the 2.5, that's $1.3 billion. That is basically the budget for the new St. Paul's Hospital. That is big money that we've just flushed down the toilet.
Yeah, and again, for a project that everyone agrees we need in some form. Yeah. This will, speaking of issues in the next election, I think that'll be one of the biggest.
Yes, certainly ICBA, we love building stuff. We had companies that were crewing up in order to build that replacement bridge. I talked to one of the guys who runs the company, who actually brought in a lot of the fill along Highway 99. And they bought extra trucks. They were sourcing this material. They were already working, and then just like that, their business was snuffed out because of John Horgan's short-sightedness and spite.
I don't want to spend too much time on this one issue, but this part fascinates me in that I think it will be a pivotal issue in this election, and yet in some ways it's pretty regionally specific. It's not like Andrew Wilkinson or John Horgan are going to be in Kamloops or Victoria or Kelowna saying, George Massey Tunnel. Yeah. But in those ridings, which may go either way, and we mentioned Delta and Surrey and Richmond, man, I think this will be almost, well, I don't want to say decisive, but really important.
Yeah, well, here's how big a fool he is, John Horgan, for canceling this. He could easily be having a ribbon cutting of this for this bridge during that next election campaign next year. Like, it was that close to the timeline. He may have had to advance it. He may have opened it in phases, but you could have had some sort of ribbon cutting milestone in the most important swing ridings in the province. No offense to the rest of us who live outside Surrey and Delta, and I guess Maple Ridge I would add to that list. He could have had that ribbon cutting, could have said, look what we've done. And you know what, at the time, I think Christy Clark had planned it to be a toll bridge. He could have said, it's part of our toll-free BC policy. You're going to drive this for free because we shouldn't be charging you to go to work. It was a win-win. But instead, this guy, let his personal ego get in the way and his hatred for Christy Clark. I also think a little bit he felt, I know some of the environmentalists they don't like any road infrastructure, so they were opposed to it. He had already lost, or was worried he was losing some of them because of his taking the tolls off the Port Mann Bridge, which is a big cornerstone of environmental activism ideology. So, I think he was nakedly pandering to them, and I hope it cost him in the next election.
Well, I think that he inherited three big projects with LNG, Site C, and the Massey Tunnel replacement. And you know what happened with the previous two. And I just feel like a decision was made that they couldn't just continue with all three. At least one of them had to be cut because it was a new government coming in.
It's funny. You're exactly right? Site C, he promised to kill Site C. He even bought one of the little stakes, Stop Site C, for the First Nation there that was raising money. A stake that, by the way, the First Nation still has. And if you'd like to sell it to me, I will pay big money on behalf of ICBA to get it for our collection. But he had promised to stop that. He didn't. He had promised to, he had mocked, ridiculed the LNG industry and plan for years, following along with his buddy Doc Weaver on the whole of its unicorns and, fairy tales, and it will never happen. And lo and behold, LNG is on its way. Some people believe that that's a polluter. We believe it's actually better for the environment net because it takes China off coal, whatever. He couldn't cancel that. He needs the money. And then, of course, you have the Massey Bridge, and I think he just felt like he had to. I think you're right.
Yeah, well, and here we are today, and I suspect we'll be talking about this in the weeks to come. Speaking of the weeks to come, I wrote something earlier this week, or actually it was last week. It's funny how the days all blend together, about possibly maybe a federal election. I felt dirty, even the words even coming out of my mouth.
Maclean,
I'm gonna
stop yourself.
I'm going to spoil it. I still don't think it's going to happen. But you were watching last week, and some of the events Justin Trudeau did, I mean, they just really looked like campaign events, didn't they?
Oh, boy, did they ever. That one where he goes into the factory or wherever that had stayed alive because of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy.
Yep.
Touting, glad handing with workers, everyone in masks, blah, blah, blah. But, that was a textbook campaign event. And the first time we've seen him venture really away from his front door at Rideau Cottage, it's not to go into the House of Commons to actually sit and debate in the question period. It's to go into one of these workplaces that were saved by the CEWS. So you're right. Your spider sense was tingling correctly. That certainly did look like a campaign event.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that saner heads will prevail and this won't happen. But, I mean, you combine the optics of that event with the polling that has been, like a lot of leaders in Canada, Justin Trudeau has had a pandemic boost. And obviously the Conservatives are going through an interminable leadership campaign, and so are the Greens, incidentally. Yep. And the NDP are broke, flat broke. I don't think a Liberal strategist would be doing their job if they weren't at least, tasting the idea to see if it was worth exploring. But again, I don't think it will actually happen. But it was hard not to watch last week and think they're not at least considering it.
Yeah. I would propose to you that if the U.S. election was being held the last week of September, and it happened and went off without a hitch, and 2 weeks later there was no spike from coronavirus, I think then the Liberals would be tempted to go because they could say, well, look, we've just seen the States where there's so many more cases of COVID. There's no spike because of this. We're going to do an election now. We're not putting your health at risk. I just don't think that works out because I believe the election is in November. So that doesn't work before Christmas and before it gets cold. You can't do it during a pandemic and during the Canadian winter. That would be a double whammy. It would seem too. The big argument against, of course, it seems too opportunistic. And generally, voters punish you for that. But at a time where you have no conservative leader or a brand new one.
And fewer opportunities with the pandemic for whoever that person is to get out there and, meet people and build momentum and all that. I mean, it's, again, if you remove a lot of things like common sense, it starts to look really
we are on the internet. We are on the internet, so we're used to removing common sense. You're right. It would be interesting. Although I think for the Liberals, look, having watched McKay and O'Toole during this leadership race, I'm not sure they're terrified of either guy. In fact, I think you want them out there as much as possible because they keep sticking their foot in their mouth and their social media is terrible. And there's a lot of issues there. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually a CPC member. I renewed my membership in order to vote in this campaign.
Okay.
I have no idea what to do, Maclean. I have no idea who to vote for. I mean, not Sloan, he's terrible. But, the other three, I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of, if you put a ballot in front of me right now, I think I'd probably vote Leslyn Lewis first, just because she's different.
Yeah.
And then maybe O'Toole, then maybe McKay. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. You either be O'Toole or McKay at the end. And they're going to be the two at the end. But it's hard. There's nothing inspiring about it. There's nothing yes, this is the person we can get behind. This is the person who's espousing, the fiscally conservative. I'm a fiscal conservative and socially in the middle. But there's no one really there with me. So it's hard. It's a weird kind of vibe.
No one seems to be building any momentum. There's no sort of gathering force behind any of the three. It's and I'm just counting Mr. Sloan.
Don't you feel like Peter McKay's campaign is a lot like Diane Watts's leadership campaign for the BC Liberals, where she was the front runner, but everyone knew she had to get to about 43, 44% on that first ballot because she wasn't going to grow very much. Yeah. And she fell short. I think she hit 39 or something, or 40.
I think that's right. But it's your classic sort of high floor, low ceiling candidate.
Exactly. And I wonder if that's McKay. If he doesn't win it on the, if he's not at 46, 47%, I'm not sure who else is moving over to Peter McKay after that.
Yeah, I don't know. And I will admit, I don't know enough about Leslyn Lewis to form a really good opinion but I mean, at the very least, it's good to have someone else in the race.
Yeah, I'm going to watch her a little bit more. I find her background's very interesting. Obviously she's female, she's black. That's two very important demographics that conservatives don't generally get. She's a trained environmental scientist. She has some understanding of that we need to have a balance in between the economy and the environment. A very impressive CV. I've heard her on talk radio a couple times, including on NW. Another plug for Smitty. Seemed very intelligent, well received by the media and by the public. She's the kind of candidacy that the more people see her, the more they really like her. So at the very least, I'm not sure where I'm going to go, but at the very least, she's caused me pause to take a second look. And I can already feel my phone going off from all the O'Toole people I know and McKay people I know freaking out that anyone would, dare stray from the front two camps.
Can we talk hockey?
Let's
talk hockey?
Let's talk hockey.
Haven't you wanted to talk hockey for 3 months now? Isn't part of you just happy that it might happen?
Yeah. Is it going to happen?
Well, I said might. We'll see. We're obviously talking about the NHL proposing to come back in what they're going to call a hub city scenario, one of which might be Vancouver, but we don't know yet. What's your take on how that's going?
Yeah, I thought the interesting thing was last week, and it was actually very instructive. It was a good reminder of who John Horgan is. So Dr. Bonnie comes out and says early on in the week, we're still in the running to be a hub city. They've met all the, I've looked at the last proposal. I like it. I signed off on it. And we still have some details to work out. But generally, we're moving forward. Horgan then went out, I think, on Friday and was just we basically took that approval even further, and started laying out details that Dr. Henry had never heard of or signed off on or pondered. And she kind of had to very, that beautiful Dr. Bonnie way, slap him down, like, in the press conference, like, no, we haven't agreed to this. And to me, we'll talk about the Hockey Hub in a second, but to me it was a sign of how bad John Horgan is on details. Like, we saw it during Prop Rep 2. When Horgan hands a file to a minister, I honestly think it goes out of his brain. Like, he just doesn't think about it again. Like, especially the ministers he trusts, like Dix and Eby. Adrian's done a great job. He's the detail guy on this. He's the one who can tell you precisely right now how many beds are open, and like, he handles that. Horgan's not the detail guy. Horgan's the big picture, the warm, he's trying to be the warm, fuzzy, everyone's favorite Uncle John guy. This is going to be a problem during an election debate. Because Andrew Wilkinson, if nothing else, is excruciatingly detail-oriented. And Wilkinson will know every detail of every major file that he wants to poke the premier on. And he will ask about these specific details. And he will catch Horgan, not knowing, or worse, making up a fact. And that is not a good thing for a premier. And I would think back to that Prop Rep debate, and that really, if you go back and watch it, where Horgan starts to let Wilkinson under his skin, where Wilkinson really starts to poke him and really gets under his skin, is on the details of the system. And Horgan didn't know the details well enough to defend it. Now, some of that was the details hadn't been set out. Some of it was
no one knew the details.
Yeah, who could be bothered to read Eby's stupid report? A little bit of both. But that's where he started to feel bad. And Horgan, Horgan's talked about how he didn't do well in school. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't, he maybe is not, he doesn't have that kind of learning system for those kind of details. Chances are, like, we all are all products of our childhood. If you've struggled through tests all your life, or that's maybe that's like a secret insecurity you have. I think like get me the popcorn. I'm ready for the debates now. Let's start debating now. Let's see what goes on here, because I don't know. Am I wrong? Like, is that? It seems to me like he gives it to a minister he trusts, like Carol James or Dix. Yeah. And he
I think he definitely is what some might call I don't want to call him hands off, but yeah, basically hands off. When he's got a minister he trusts, and I think the ones you named are good examples. He doesn't interfere much, and I think the premier has said this on a couple of occasions that he doesn't. I'm thinking specifically of a few things with Carol James where we've asked him about upcoming tax changes and policies, and he'll say, "Oh, I don't want to step on her toes because she's handling this," and I think that's true. And in terms of being a details thing, I also think you're right in that he is like the big picture guy. His job is tone and to be reassuring and likable, I guess, is what he's going for. And you're right, on a point by point policy debate, he could be in some trouble. It's funny, before the election, everyone was very worried about his temper, and I think he's got that under control. But policy is a harder thing to just like nail down, especially if it's not just one ministry and one file, right? Like, it's hard to be an expert on the entire provincial government. Yeah. And the downfall, because you're right, and we don't talk about this enough, the proportional representation debate, which was very interesting, but it was also half an hour on one topic, and with one person. When you've got three, and I think probably just three leaders in a debate doing one topic for 5 minutes at a time, he'll have more room, but we'll see. I also don't think the Greens are going to be playing as nice in the next election either. I think they're going to be realizing that if they're going to have any hope of winning back any of their, now 2 seats, they've got to fend off NDP votes. So I think whoever the Green leader is going to be going after him too. And whoever the Green leader is, they'll probably be very policy focused on very specific files. Yeah.
There was, during the BC Liberal leadership campaign, there was, talking of Diane Watts, there was a dirty pool question from one of the candidates or the crowd to Diane specifically about, it was like the most obscure, like coastal forestry.
Oh, yeah.
Log terrace. And and she floundered, just completely fumbled it. And I don't blame her. I read tons of stuff about public policy. I've never given second thought to that particular minute issue of a bigger one. I'm sure you haven't either. Yeah. I'm sure no one in the press gallery had ever written a story on it. But it was kind of that. Now, I think Mike DeYoung did a good job answering it, but he was a forest minister, so he kind of knew it. I talked to another forest minister previous forest minister, we'll go name us, he certainly was a Diane supporter, but he was like, that is super obscure. That is not the kind of question that we should be even having in these broader leadership debates. So I kind of wonder if something like that could come up and trip up Horgan. And Horgan is, you're right, he's done much better on the trying to be the jovial guy, but there are flashes of anger there. And if he feels like it's starting to get away from him, and if he feels that, presuming it's Sonia Furstenau is landing a few good points on him on the island, and Wilkinson's getting under skin on details, you could see Hulk Horgan again. I mean, he could come back.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's one thing to keep your temper in question period when you're in government, when you always have the last word. Mm-hmm. Always, always, always. And, to some extent, you kind of control. I mean, yes, you get asked what you get asked, but then, your answer can be whatever you want it to be. Right. It's different in two respects in our debate. A, he's not always going to get the last word. And B, I think it's pretty clear he genuinely doesn't like Andrew Wilkinson. Right. I think it'll be much more difficult for anyone to control their temper if they're dealing with somebody they genuinely don't like on topics they disagree on.
Yeah, I think the feeling's mutual between those two. You're right about Horgan, too, in question period. Like, I've noticed that he will often answer the last question, specifically so he can close it on a high note. Yeah.
Christy Clark did the same thing a lot of the time.
Yeah. So it's kind of like running the anchor leg of a relay. So
yeah.
Anyway, so that's kind of the politics of it. That's sort of what I was thinking about last week. As for the actual hub city itself, God, it's just so hypocritical of politicians, right? Like, so Horgan comes in, he scuttles the World Cup bid for BC because it wasn't going to have enough economic spin-off to make it worthwhile for Vancouver, for British Columbia. The Liberals went crazy on that and said, that's wrong. We should have gone forward with it. Fast forward 3 years, now you've got Horgan pushing the hub city concept because it's going to provide jobs and economic spin-off, the very thing he said the World Cup would not do. And you've got the BC Liberals saying, hold up, it's unfair that you have one set of rules for elite athletes, another for normal people, much like, the NDP said about, elite World Cup players versus, minor soccer. It's just, for me, it's that, I don't know. It's not even hypocrisy. It's just politics. I don't know. It's just like, guys, could someone just please be somewhat ideologically principled on this and carry it through both ways? Yeah.
Well, I mean, all politicians are going to be tempted by, giving the people something, I'm going to use the air quotes here, something cool. And if that's, being a hub city for the NHL, if it's the World Cup, I mean, yeah, they're all going to be tempted. And you're right, there are some real concerns about how it will work logistically. And, in other places that are trying this are already facing some questions. I don't know if you're a wrestling fan, but today there was news that someone, a performer with WWE, has tested positive. And they're kind of doing their own sort of in-house hub city thing, if you like. We're taping everything out of their own facility. That's all in question now. All it takes is one, and the whole house of cards comes tumbling down.
Yeah, well, Ezekiel Elliott from the terrible Dallas Cowboys, he's come down with it.
Oh, I didn't even see that.
Yeah, so I guess 4 Houston Texans and Dallas Cowboy players yesterday were announced to have it. He's recovering. Apparently he's angry that his name got out. Certainly for privacy concerns, I can see why. Not to mention the fact there is some question about whether there's lasting lung damage from certain COVID cases. One can only imagine what that would do to an elite athlete like Ezekiel Elliott, running back, probably one of the best 3 running backs in football.
Absolutely.
Anyways, so yeah, you're right. There's all sorts of questions, right? Like, I mean, we can get into obscure hockey questions. Like, you follow Elias Pettersson on Instagram. You follow Brock Besser on Instagram. Brock's sitting by the lake in Minnesota. Elias is sitting in Sweden in his very nice condo. And you're like, these guys have to come back to North America from 2 places where we're not terribly sure how great the system has been in fighting COVID. Like, you're going to introduce them to a Bo Horvat, whose wife is 9 months pregnant, and they timed the baby to have it during the summer when hockey players weren't supposed to be playing. Like, are you really saying to Bo, like, you got to play hockey and stay away from your wife and soon-to-be newborn child for its first? Like, that's hard. Like, that's tough stuff. We're asking a lot of, like, I think we need to step back. Yeah, they're millionaires. We're asking a lot of these players. Like, we're asking a lot for them to sequester themselves from their families for that long.
I don't know that I could do it or would want to do it. And I mean, the other thing is, I mean, you mentioned they're millionaires, and I'm not trying to be glib, but like a lot of these guys, they can take the year off. Like it's okay. You mentioned, was it Brock Besser in a lake in Minnesota? I'd stay there.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
You've seen some NBA players say much the same thing. Like, I'm not coming back for. I mean, it's not like you're going to go down in history as if you win the championship, it's going to have an asterisk for all of time. I mean, not suggesting it's worthless, but yeah, what are you risking, and what is it for?
And those athletes have the money that they can actually properly quarantine themselves, right?
That's right.
They can have someone dropping off food for them. They can have, they can really limit their interactions with the outside world because they don't, most of us are not doing that anymore because we have to get up and go to work, right? Like,
Exactly.
yeah, you're socially distant, that sort of thing, but you can really reduce the risk if you don't leave your house very often. So it's really it's an interesting thing to see. It looks like baseball's just completely fallen apart now. That's more just the idiots running it. Basketball, you're right. Football seems more willing to go, but of course they're the last sport to start.
Yeah, they get to watch everyone else make mistakes, and also they're the least reliant on live tickets.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they could just play in empty stadiums, and I'm not suggesting that's without risk, but it's certainly easier.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I don't know. Hockey in July. Yeah, the thing is, like, can you imagine if like Las Vegas is a hub city trying to keep ice playable, and not just like on an afternoon in July, but like playing a triple header.
Yeah.
I don't think that's possible, but I mean, obviously, we'll see.
Yeah, trying to keep these players out of casinos.
Yeah. And socially distant, if you know what I'm saying.
Distant. Yeah, it's and then what happens if a player comes down with it on a team?
Well, we're sort of seeing that with, I mean, yes and no, it's not a sport. I can hear you laughing from here, but we're seeing that with wrestling right now.
Sports entertainment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's similar in some respects. They perform in arenas and all that. Anyway, what they've done is they've canceled. They were going to be taping their shows today. Canceled. Because you have to.
Yeah, no, you're right. Hey, can I bring up one last issue before we go?
Of course.
It is time for the NDP and for Dr. Bonnie Henry to allow churches to meet again. Any place of worship. I find it very difficult to understand or comprehend why in churches they cannot even have groups of up to 50. Some of these large churches can seat 1,500 people. You're telling me we couldn't have 300 people meeting there, properly spaced out, following the rules? And Dr. Henry gave us a song and dance about how bad songs and dance are to spreading COVID this week. I just do not believe we should be lumping in places of worship, which are so important for so many people's mental health and social connections. We should not be lumping those places in with nightclubs and strip clubs and things like that. Like the last to open once the pandemic, once we have a vaccine. That to me is unfair. I actually subscribe a little bit to the American theory that like people have a right to assemble in some ways. Like, yes, be safe, find ways to do it as safely as possible, but it's time to open up these houses of worship to, to people. We're in a mental health crisis. I don't think the BC NDP have done a good job managing the mental health impacts of COVID. I don't understand why there's not a 511 dial nurses line, but for mental health, where it's connecting you with psychologists, psychiatrists, and therapists, and people who could have been put in a queue to help you. I don't understand why they don't think this is an important part of everyday life. Like for a lot of people, their faith community is where they draw strength and encouragement and connection and mental wellness. It's time to reopen these. Alberta's doing it. Alberta, for all the grief the Alberta NDP have given Jason Kenney, their death rate per capita is identical to British Columbia's, which is, by the way, like 1/20th of what the death rate is in Quebec. They're reopening churches. They're allowing churches to, kind of decide for themselves how to actually do it. That's great. It's time. Let's get on with it.
I know you have a personal experience in this area. I grew up very Catholic. Most of my family still is. I will admit that there are parts of, again, speaking only from my experience being in Catholic churches, there's a lot of aspects of the service that you'd have to change. There's lots of shaking of hands. Certainly no receiving communion, probably, or at least doing it in a very different way. And I don't know off the top of my head how you do that, but I mean, I haven't been thinking about it. But you're right. I mean, it is a cornerstone of a lot of people's lives, and I don't think that's hyperbole. And I mean, I can't imagine having to just forego that, not just for 3 months, but essentially indefinitely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just going on and on and on and on. And you get the sense from them, they're not going to do it until there's a vaccine. Meanwhile, we hear about movie theaters preparing to reopen. Like, come on.
Yeah,
And
that must be hard to swallow.
you're telling me, like, I worked near Metrotown Mall. We went down today to the food court, and people are wearing masks, and you're trying to stay 6 feet away, but you're not. Like, people are coming in and out of the bubble. That's fine. It's a risk we're willing to take because there's only 185 live cases out there in all of British Columbia right now. But like, church, like it's just, I feel like, what do I want to say? The NDP in the past and left-wingers in general have been criticized for not understanding how important faith is to various communities and people. Look, I'm a sporadic church attender. Especially during kids' sports season, I go very little. But like to me, there's no reason why you can't open it up and find a way for churches to at least get a third of their congregations through every week. So at least they're seeing each other a little bit and having that kind of welcome thing. And maybe, everyone's masked up to sing. Maybe you're pointing people in different directions. Maybe you do it outside. Like even allow them to go outside and meet socially distant. Like there are ways to do this.
And to be clear, you're not, when you say church, you're using that as shorthand for a place of worship. Obviously synagogues, mosques, tabernacles, all those things.
Yeah, exactly. I think church because obviously I grew up in the church and that's, kind of my frame of reference. But you're absolutely right. Like mosques and, you speak with Muslims, and like such an important part of their culture and their faith is joining together in prayer and praying the same. Like that is a huge part of that connection to each other, and the Sikh faith, and like they believe in these kind of gatherings. And I get it; it has to be socially distant, but give them the ability to gather again. Alberta's doing it. There's no reason why British Columbia shouldn't be moving this up and finding a way to do it sooner.
No, and Dr. Bonnie Henry has said on a number of occasions that the reason it's been successful here is that people have been smart. People have been, being responsible and managing their risks and doing things like socially distance and washing their hands and wearing masks. And you're right. There's no immediate reason that I can see why a house of worship couldn't adapt and make some changes that, a movie theater or a food court, which I haven't tried yet, have been able to do.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, that was the last thing I wanted to raise. So thank you for allowing my rants.
It's a valid topic, and I'm not sure it's been getting enough attention.
Yeah, I think part of it is, I think it's a bigger issue the farther you get outside the main metropolitan areas.
Yeah, probably.
Where there aren't the same kind of social services and other infrastructure around, and church really is, a pseudo rec center for large community or for various communities. So it's just something that like. If I were pastoring a church, I'd really be pushing my denomination to figure out like why aren't we able to meet? I can only imagine the financial impact on these churches as well. Like not gathering every week, like not bringing in. Now many churches have moved over to pre-approved debits and things like that, and you can give online, but not having that ability.
It's been a challenge, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, it's been a challenge for places of worship to remain present in their people's lives during this time. And I just feel like that was a missed opportunity because we should have been finding ways to bring them more in because I think they would have helped with a lot of the mental health issues.
Yeah, group counseling, basically, right?
Totally. All right, that's all I got.
I think that's more than enough for this week. And next week, we won't talk about this long. In fact, we won't talk about it at all. But this place will be a little busier than it is now. The House returns, sort of, in person next week. And I can't wait to tell you all about it.
It'll be great.
It'll be exciting.
It'll be great. I wonder what the first question will be. I think it's going to be gaming grants.
Yeah, it could be. It could well be. We had a good piece on that by somebody who knows about community organizations and how much they rely on it. But that's a valid question. Yeah,
they've said they're going to do it for this year, but years 2 and 3 are up in the air. That's $140 million a year to the provincial treasury. But in the scheme of a $55 billion budget, $140 million is like Maclean could go downstairs and shake out the couch cushions in the speaker's office and find $140 mil.
That's probably true.
At least that's my perception.
Until then, we will have to speculate. We'll find out in a week. He's at Jordan Bateman. I'm at Maclean K. And you can find us on the mothership at the Orca. And until then, happy politics.
And no underscores in our Twitter.
None.